Hey there guys, I hope you're all doing very well. Welcome back to another video, and I'm going to be talking about Gladiator 2. Now, this is a movie that I was really anticipated for. I loved the first Gladiator movie. It's been so long since I last saw that movie, but I did watch it again recently before the release of Gladiator 2 to recap my brain with this movie. And for a movie that's nearly over 20 years old, it still holds up so well. It's such a beautifully crafted film, and I really think this kind of is exemplary of Ridley Scott's work. And I really think, when people watch the first Gladiator movie, you could really appreciate why this was a great film and it won many awards. And I think it also won Russell Crowe a Best Actor award. So there was a lot of expectations living up for Gladiator 2, and going into it, I pretty much had massive expectations when it came to this film. Now, before I start talking about this film, there is a point I want to talk about. I haven't been the biggest admirer of Ridley Scott's most recent films. His recent movies haven't really lived up to the expectations of writing and storytelling that I think his previous films and works did, like Alien and obviously Gladiator, those types of films. I mean, I'm not saying like his movies have been bad by any stretch of the imagination, but they have been what I would call underwhelming. So the last movie I watched that Ridley Scott did was Napoleon, and I really felt that movie did have a lot of flaws, and it was a little bit of a question mark really how this sequel will turn out to be, considering it is over 20 years old. And I don't think many people would have considered a sequel to come out. I personally didn't. But now, after watching it, does this sequel live up, and is it actually a good film? I enjoyed it. I think it's a very good film, but is it as good as the first Gladiator movie? Now, that I would say is a no. Now, that doesn't mean that this movie is bad or anything. Like I said, I really enjoyed the film. It's a good film in its own right, but there's a lot of things from the first Gladiator movie that does lack from the sequel that isn't really present from it, and it kind of does leave a little bit of a sour taste. So one of the things I really want to talk about with this movie, and I think is probably my biggest compliment for this film, is the action. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. I think a lot of the visual effects as well is complemented very well. There is more CGI that has been used in this movie compared to the previous film, and it's not jarring or feels artificial in any way. I think they do use it very well for the production that they had, and there is a lot of good action moments, and especially a lot of self-aware gruesome scenes that do get pretty you could get pretty grossed out with. So I really think from a visual perspective and an action perspective, it does deliver very well. And especially when you get into like the fight scenes of the Colosseum, and they really play out a very different theme throughout, I think that complements this movie very well. Also, another thing I also want to highlight with this movie is the acting performances. It was really good. I think a lot of the actors did very good with the roles that they were given. So Paul Mescal's role as Lucius was really good. So he was the main character of the movie, and he is the son of Maximus. Now, the role he's been given is not as good and powerful compared to Russell Crowe's performance as Maximus. However, I do think for the role that Paul Mescal was given for playing as Lucius as the main character was really good for this movie. Also, Pedro Pascal does a very good performance as playing Aetius, who's like a Roman general in this movie, and he definitely excels in that. And also Denzel Washington. I think his role as Macranus, or I think that's how you pronounce it. I'm not really good with these words, but his performance for his character was also another thing I also want to highlight as well. And I think a lot of the actors as well for the other characters they were given did a very good job in that respective department. Also, another thing I also just forgotten is Derek Jacobi as well as Connie Nielsen, who inspired their roles from the first Gladiator movie, do a very good job with their performances in this one as well. So I've just forgotten to mention. So some of my main things I want to talk about with this movie that I do have issues with is really the story and the writing. So I really think those are like my main issues I do have. Now, I'm not gonna really go over it because I really do think it is gonna spoil the film if I really get into the sort of nitty gritties of what I do think the story and some of the plots as well, the characters do play out with this film. So that's something that I'm really not going to talk about. But essentially, I will say from Gladiator 2, the story and the synopsis and the premise does have a very similar take and approach from the first film. So you have very similar characters with somewhat similar traits from the first movie, but there are like a lot more different ways of subplots and uneven writing that does play out in this second movie compared to the first movie. The first movie had a very more linear, simple premise of following Maximus and his way through the ranks as a gladiator to try and, get himself back up to become essentially to bring peace to Rome. Essentially, that was kind of the idea. This one plays the same way with Lucius as well, but I think there are like some things that there are like some inconsistencies of how the writing and the story does play out. Again, not gonna talk details of it because I really do think talking any details about it is just gonna give away the movie and just spoil the movie. So I think that's something for a take for you guys to go into when you watch the movie for yourself. But that's the kind of the main issue I do have. And I think if you do really watch the first movie going into the second one, you are going to notice those flaws. And I really do think you will notice it. Now, I think if you do watch it on its own, you probably won't think about it as much. But I think for people who really appreciated how the first Gladiator movie was, the way it was written and the acting performances, mostly like from Russell Crowe and Joaquin Phoenix especially, you will notice like how the euphoria of those characters were really delivered for those roles. Not saying that this movie doesn't deliver, but you notice it's something that is very different in the way that how the writing and how the overall story was really exemplified. So I think that's something that you will notice that this second movie does lack from the first one. But also there are like other things I will say. Like the first Gladiator movie also had a very good soundtrack. I'm a bit disappointed to say that this one doesn't have a good soundtrack, to be honest, and is really lacking in that one. There was always like a good soundtrack when there was always like, battles and moments that played out. This one, for some odd reason, didn't really use that very often. So it kind of really didn't, put me on the edge of my seat or really, get me excited with any of the Colosseum battles or these sort of things that really played out in the movie. I mean, it all looked good, but it didn't really sort of add more of the excitement and the thrills, essentially. But overall, I enjoyed Gladiator 2. And maybe I'm being a little bit harsh by putting so many of the comparisons to the first movie, because maybe sometimes you could just look at the movie on its own. Now, I think if you did look at this movie on its own, it is a good film, and I think you will enjoy it. You will enjoy a lot of the acting performances as well as the traits of a lot of the characters and the writing in that respect. So I think that's all good and well, is all well and good, but it is an underwhelming experience if you are watching this like back to back, or if you really are a big fan of the first movie. So there are like some things that you can point out, some things with this film, although maybe it could be very harsh. Maybe I'm being harsh with it, but that's kind of my take on it because I really like the first Gladiator movie and I watched it again just before this one. But that being said, this is a very good film. But yeah, let me know what you think of Gladiator 2. Let me know if you have watched it or not. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you have, please like, comment, subscribe. Dislike if you want to dislike. Thank you so much for watching. And yeah, that's about it. See you later.